Have you ever had that sinking feeling when you check your porch and your package is just gone? Today's story is about someone whose neighbor turned package theft into a full-time hobby, stealing delivery after delivery for months. But our narrator wasn't about to let this porch pirate get away with it. They set up the ultimate trap, a glitter bomb surprise that turned their thief's life into a sparkling nightmare. This is drama narrative, where petty revenge gets the justice it deserves. Stay tuned, because this glitter explosion is absolutely legendary.
I live alone in a third-floor apartment in a row of brick townhomes that feel like they've been plucked out of a quieter decade. Stoops, small front gardens, and the kind of narrow sidewalks that encourage nods and brief smiles rather than conversation. Our block is a jumble. Families with strollers, young professionals with bikes chained to fences, an old woman who waters her begonias every morning, and tucked into the corner duplex next to me, a neighbor I'd come to know as the guy in his 30s. Life was normal enough. I worked freelance, the rhythm of irregular income, long coffee-fueled evenings, and a modest budget that made online orders feel like tiny victories. Those packages mattered. The first one that disappeared was small. A pair of noise-canceling earbud tips I'd ordered because my ancient set kept popping out. It arrived on a Friday. The tracking said it had been delivered to my doorstep at 10:12 a.m. I remember standing in my kitchen, coffee mug in hand, scanning the hallway, the landing, nothing. I chalked it up to mistake or a neighbor who'd picked it up to be helpful. I called the carrier, filed a claim, and told myself it would show up. The emotional state after that first loss was mild irritation, the precise kind that sits in your chest and becomes background noise, frustrating but survivable. I could afford a new pair of tips. It wasn't a crisis. What it did, though, was make me look. 2 weeks later another package vanished. This one was a cookbook I'd been excited about, heavy with glossy photos and crease-free pages. Then a tiny but expensive phone charger adapter. Then a set of socks I'd bought for my sister's birthday. By the end of 3 weeks I had lost 5 packages. The total was hardly catastrophic, just over $300, but the numbers mattered less than what they signified. Someone was lifting things right off my stoop. Where at first I'd been confused, the confusion hardened into a cold, creeping irritation. I began to notice patterns. The deliveries all happened mid-morning, between 9:30 and 11:30. The packages were always small enough to be carried in one hand. They were gone when I came home from work, or, in one case, when I looked out an upstairs window. Investigation felt inevitable. I started small and non-invasive. I checked the building's CCTV feed that faced the alley, mostly grainy, mostly faces passing by, asked neighbors if they'd seen anything. A teenage couple said they'd noticed someone hanging around, but weren't sure who, and reviewed the delivery timestamps. I tried leaving a polite note with my address at the communal mailroom. Please do not leave packages unattended, which felt embarrassingly passive-aggressive. Nothing changed. Growing frustration began to affect my mood. I disliked the idea of being targeted in my own neighborhood. Packages felt like proof of my place in the world, little items that stitched together the life I led. The thefts were more than inconvenience. They were violations of a small. The breakthrough came almost by accident. A friend of mine had a better doorbell camera, one of those models that records wide-angle HD whenever motion is detected. I borrowed it for a weekend, mounted it near my door, and left the cloud recording active. It felt slightly ridiculous, like stakeout theater, but I was tired of being the butt of an invisible joke. On a bright Tuesday at 10:07 a.m., the footage captured the moment that changed everything. The angle was perfect, my stoop and the sidewalk framed in HD, the shadow of a tree brushing the pavement. The timestamp blinked in the corner. A figure crossed the frame, medium height, hooded jacket, unremarkable walk. He paused in front of my door, scanned left and right. The camera captured his face and side profile for a split second, leaned down, picked up the small Amazon box, and carried it away without looking back. The whole thing took less than 8 seconds. Not because glitter is noble, but because it's ridiculous and indelible in a way that fits petty crimes. I didn't want to harm anyone or destroy property. I wanted embarrassment and a long cleanup. I bought a novelty glitter package prank from a reputable shop, something marketed as harmless and socially mortifying, and I made sure it contained only party-grade glitter and confetti, nothing corrosive, no liquids, no flammable materials. The idea was theatrical humiliation, not danger. The box I used looked like every other online delivery, an Amazon-branded carton with a new shipping label slapped over it. I resealed edges with fresh tape, printed a generic return address, and made sure the outside looked like something a forgetful online shopper might leave unattended. I set up 2 cameras, one with a narrow view pointed at the doorstep to capture the person's approach and hands, and a second wide-angle cam to capture the immediate environment and reaction. I positioned them at angles that would clearly show a face and timestamp the entire sequence. Waiting felt strange. There's an odd mixture of anticipation and guilt when you're about to humiliate a neighbor. Part of me justified it as deterrence, a public demonstration that thieving had consequences. Part of me worried I'd crossed a line from neighborhood squabble into vigilante theatrics. I told myself it would be quick, messy, and then over. I told myself a lot of things. I left the glitter bait on a Wednesday morning and took up a discreet perch across the street, discreet being relative, since my heart hammered so loud I'm sure the local pigeons heard it. The timeline moved like slow gear teeth. 2 hours passed. I walked back and forth, pretending to check mail or stretch my legs. At 11:20 a.m. a figure approached, hoodie up despite the warm sun. It was him. He scanned, crouched to pick up the box, and carried it at a pace that suggested habit. He didn't look hurried. He moved like someone returning from errands, like he'd done this before and expected a normal outcome. The narrow camera caught the moment his fingers tore into the tape, the slight hush of breath as he peeled back a corner. Then the glitter detonated. It was not an explosion so much as a soft, indiscriminate bloom of sparkle. A cloud of tiny, glittering dust puffed upward and out, catching light and hanging in the air like a storm of tiny stars. It landed on his jacket, in his hair, on his eyelashes. It floated in the crooks of his elbows, dusted his shoes, and stubbornly stuck to the sides of his mouth. The wider camera caught the whole tableau, glitter raining down, the small explosive laugh of air as dust clouded, and then the look on his face. Shock. Then confusion. Then fury. He clapped a hand to his mouth as if to brush the sparkles away, swore in a guttural, stupefied kind of way, and stomped back toward his porch, the flakes marking his path like a sudden, ridiculous breadcrumb trail. The audio picked up a string of curses, a startled demand. "What the hell? Who did this?" And then muffled rustling as he tried to shake it off. Neighbors appeared, drawn by the commotion, Mrs. Patel from across the hall, the teenage couple with skateboards, the old woman with begonias who peered over her fence with scandalized interest. He stomped back toward his door, hair dusted like foil, and I felt, for the first time, a bursting, childish victory. The cameras had captured everything: approach, timestamp, the slow crumble from casual theft to glitter-dusted humiliation. He didn't storm my door immediately. Instead, there was a day of side glances and a town-size rumor that swelled and then popped. A neighbor, the teenage couple, texted me a clip. Someone had uploaded the footage to a private chat, and the block's small social machine churned. He came by my building 2 days later, knocking not on my door but leaving a note tucked under my doormat. "Stop. You've gone too far." The handwriting was shaky, an embarrassment of capitals. When we finally spoke face to face, outside in daylight, he was jittery. He accused me of harassment, of setting him up, of escalating things. I showed him the original doorbell footage on my phone, time-stamped and grainy but clear enough, the scar on the hand, the crooked eyebrow, the lifting of my packages. I didn't shout. I let him watch, and for a moment I thought he might fall apart. He denied, then stammered, then offered a murky apology that smelled like excuses. "I was going to return them. I needed the cash. I thought they were abandoned." The apology was thin as tissue, but it existed. He was angry, furious enough to holler about calling the police, but he didn't. I did contact the police the next day, not to press charges. I didn't want that weight on my conscience in that precise way, but to file a report. The officer was polite, took statements, and suggested mediation. No arrests were made. Perhaps because the value lost was small, perhaps because neighborhood theft often becomes a file in a drawer. The theft stopped immediately afterward. Whether it was the public humiliation, the sense that his face was now recorded in more than one place, or a new fear of getting caught again, the packages ceased to vanish. There was no escalation beyond a few sharp words exchanged in the hallway. There was no dramatic retribution, no legal showdown. The neighbor moved out 6 months later, to an apartment 2 blocks over, and I never saw him take a single item from my stoop again. If there was a lesson learned, it was pragmatic. When the cost of your habit exceeds the convenience of its rewards, it tends to stop. Now, when I look back, the glitter is still in the story but gone from my conscience in ways that surprise me. The neighborhood feels quieter. The small violations vanished with him. I don't keep a shrine of glittered memories. I also don't pretend the prank was an unproblematic choice. There are 2 angles to the morality of what I did. On one hand, the glitter bomb was theatrical, harmless, and effective. It stopped the thefts. It delivered a clear message with minimal physical harm. On the other hand, it was a kind of vigilante act that took the law into my hands and risked escalating into something worse. I could have handled it differently: more paperwork, more neighborly confrontation, better building security, a formal complaint. The reason I didn't is that sometimes anger wants immediate articulation, and small injustices want immediate antidotes. Would I do it again? Honestly, maybe, and not without hesitation. If the thefts had continued, or escalated to something more personal or expensive, I might have been less inclined to rely on glitter and more likely to involve authorities earlier. My advice to others who find themselves on the receiving end of stealing neighbors is practical. Secure your deliveries if you can, locked boxes, delivery instructions, get clear footage if possible, and exhaust reasonable channels before escalating. If you choose a theatrical solution, make sure it won't cause harm beyond embarrassment, and be prepared to live with the moral consequences. Unexpected consequences? A small ripple. Mrs. Patel teased me for weeks. "You finally joined the revolution," she said, handing over a bag of homemade biscotti. The teenage couple declared me the neighborhood legend for about as long as those honors last, and the old woman with the begonias waved at me with new, conspiratorial warmth. The neighbor's guilt, if it ever became remorse, was private. He left, and so did the problem. When I stand on my stoop now and watch a delivery vanish into a package locker or get handed to my friend across the hall, I think about the weight of small things. A pair of earbud tips, a cookbook, socks. These were not treasures in a grand sense. But they were mine, and their theft felt like an erasure of the small comforts that make a life livable. In the end, I learned that suburban justice is messy. It's equal parts paperwork and spectacle, patience and impatience. The glitter was a punctuation mark, a tiny, sparkling period at the end of a sentence I did not want to keep reading. I don't boast about it. I don't hang the footage on a wall. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making a problem stop. Sometimes the best revenge is realizing how far you're willing to go to get there, and thinking twice before you go that far again.
So what can we learn from this glitter-covered tale of neighborhood justice? First, documentation is your best friend. Our narrator had the foresight to set up cameras and gather evidence before taking action. Without that proof, this would have been an unwinnable he-said-she-said situation. But with video evidence, they protected themselves legally while exposing the thief red-handed. Second, creative consequences work better than confrontation. Instead of screaming matches or police reports that go nowhere, our narrator chose a response that was annoying, memorable, but ultimately harmless. The glitter bomb sent a crystal-clear message without crossing any legal lines. Sometimes the best revenge is the kind that makes someone find sparkles in their carpet for the next 6 months. Third, boundaries matter more than being the nice neighbor. The moment someone repeatedly violates your property and trust, you have every right to protect yourself creatively. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and our narrator proved that perfectly. Now here's my question for you. Was this glitter bomb revenge completely justified, or did our narrator take it too far? Drop your verdict in the comments. Team Glitter Bomb or Team Too Petty? And if you've survived your own nightmare neighbor or package thief situation, share your story below. Your drama might be featured in an upcoming video. Smash that like button if you love creative revenge. Subscribe for more wild stories every single week. And hit the bell so you never miss the chaos.